to Now show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Good afternoon. And my name is Rob van Kranenburg. I'm going to talk without slides today. So you're going to have to watch me, I guess, or not. And I'm going to talk about like 15 minutes, 20 minutes on identity. Why? Because after the whole discussion that we had for the past, let's say, 20 years on data, it now seems that identity is actually the core issue that that we have to discuss. And the reason for this is has certain trajectories, and I think I will try to explain, let's say, three. First, I'm gonna sort of take off this thing. Just bear with me for a second. Very good, and also don't need these headphones. So the first trajectory is a very long trajectory, and that has to do with basically the core of what we're talking about. So registration of people in China began with the first emperor. That was 278 BC. And this is a very important argument to think also about what's happening now in China with what's perceived to be and what is the social credit system, which is a system in which people are basically seen as entities in the same way as objects, machines, goods, animals. So all processes are sort of equalized in a particular way as sets of properties, and then imported somehow with analytics in some kind of a dashboard in order to get some view of the overall situation, which could be called some kind of cybernetics. But it's important to understand that in that situation, registration of people already started 300 years before Christ. In Europe, and that's the position where I talk from, this registration of people was around 1800 with Napoleon and the Code Napoleon. So basically we're 2000 years after this particular way of looking at people in a particular system as individuals grouped in particular formats. And that's a first sort of important thing to understand, how this notion of identity got then being taken up as being, first of all, part of, let's say, a kind of a local family kind of identity. I know you because I know your father or your brother and all of these things. And then it's not coincidental that this also somehow relates to our move to the cities around 1800, 1850, around that time, when we started living in environments where we did not know everybody. And so all of these things, all types of documentation sort of comes up. And this is happening around 1800, 1850. And then the state sort of assigns itself the role of, let's say, the issuer, the first issuer of identity of its subjects, of its individuals. And this basically leaves us now in two strong trajectories, all of which has been accelerated by the current COVID-19 crisis, where all of this is becoming extremely visible. Is that we seem now to have two big major bubbles. One, a kind of a state bubble, one kind of a commercial bubble, in which individuals or citizens are issued identities, either through a state with passports, and the most important capability of that agency is to determine if a person is legal or illegal, which is quite something. If you're illegal, you have no capacity to act in particular ways. If you're illegal, you are. So you have to sort of see it as kind of the namer of the names, or the issuer of the issuer, sort of like this primary instance of handing over the capability basically to exist. So this one bubble comes from states, and the other bubble comes from the companies, and especially the digital giants that we know: Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon. And so then, in order to basically understand this kind of situation, we have to go to another sort of big line, which is the institution of basically of education and of building meaning, which was to us always tied to the book. So in 1452, there was the Gutenberg press, and it was possible for people to basically print and educate everyone around them. So if the kings, queens, and priests would have wanted, everybody in Europe, it's about 18 million people, would have been by 1450, would have been literate by 1500, because you could all make them read. As we know, this didn't happen. And if I read a book in my language and ask, can I read a book in my language in 16, 17, 1800, I basically get burned or go to jail. And if I do this in 1900, I also go to jail, because I'm probably a communist or an anarchist. So first free public book lending in the UK is 1918, and the first free open library, de gemeentelijke bibliotheek in Den Haag, is also 1917, 1918, and that's all the work of one man. So with this, it's become very clear that power, raw power, let's say vested interest, and that's exactly the interest in occupying the position of this vested naming interest of making people legal, illegal, was able to stall distributing learning tools for about 450 years. And that's basically our trajectory. That's the space in which we live. All the institutions that we see, say representative democracy, that now is becoming quite ineffective and useless. All these institutions, all these universities, the notion of the university, all these things are coming from that period, and they're all showing now how ineffective all of this is becoming in actually making meaning of the current situation. And that's quite logical, because what we have now, what we are, especially us, as this generation is living in, is the moment of this paradigm shift that started with the internet. The internet, as we know, started with Bob Kahn, windsurf, especially windsurf, windsurf.com, 50s, 60s, 70s. And the way that they framed their new forms of communication, first between machines only, building the protocol, the language, or the grammar, was called TCP/IP, which basically says pass on the packet. And with this very simple, elegant protocol, they removed all the gatekeepers that was built in the past 500 years before that. So this was a massive, massive radical act. At that time, it wasn't really that much seen like that, but now we are living it. So this pass on the packet basically said, we come from a paradigm in which information and data has been safeguarded and guaranteed by numerous gatekeepers. These gatekeepers were tied to exclusivity, greed, ego, and violence. And this protocol stopped all of that, made an end to all of that, and simply said, we're going to a new paradigm. I'm not going to ask you what you are. I'm not going to ask you where you come from. I'm not even going to ask where you go to. I'm just going to simply pass on the packet. Then, in the 90s, Tim Berners-Lee put HTML on top of the TCP/IP. And of course, we had Ted Nelson there in the 90s with Xanadu, and he said, Tim, you better don't do that, because you're going to put reciprocity on top of non-reciprocity. You're going to put speed on top of speed, and you're going to create fake news in about 10 years. Which of course has all happened, and which of course Tim Berners-Lee could know by that time, but choose to disregard. He's now trying to sort of remedy it, but that's of course not going to work. But the point is, it was good that he did it, of course, because now we had this speed on speed. We had this wildfire. And this wildfire at some point only was in dedicated machines called laptops and computers and some tablets. And now they're everywhere. So we're in the era of Internet of Things, in which every object either has some kind of barcode or some kind of QR code or some kind of NFC near field communication, some kind of chip, some RFID, in order to be part of this big digital family to be read out, or an object will have some kind of processor that actually sort of gives this, that actually processes this information and plays it back to the big digital family. What happened was, of course, is that in its first iterations, people like Jobs or Zuckerberg and Bezos were not that bright people. So it's not as if they were so brilliant. They simply took the fire. The fire was already lit. They grabbed it, built their stoves, and that's basically what they did. Sort of build their stoves on top of the analog drivers. It didn't really innovate that much, but they built their huge platforms and their huge walled gardens that we see now. As they did this very brilliantly in the sense of marketing, that's what they're very good. They basically managed to get us all in with the freeness of everything they were offering into these walled gardens. So this is a situation which we're in now. So we're seeing these state bubbles arising in these commercial bubbles. So this is the moment where everything becomes really, really clear, and so now we are in a position, in a moment in the world in which we have a pandemic, and in that pandemic, we all have a smartphone. Basically, lots of us have a smartphone, not everyone, which we must take into account in these stories, but let's, for the sake of argument, say that a lot of people have the smartphone. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, so you would assume that people would install immediately apps on this smartphone and give a lot of data about their health and about the projection of their health, give a lot of data about their family, about their neighbors, about all people. Because this is a life and death situation. So you would assume that having the capacity to actually be able to track and trace and to then maybe not get sick, as we know, this is a pretty serious way of getting sick. You would assume, if I was a visitor from another planet, I would assume, wow, this is fantastic. This iteration of these people on this planet have actually sort of maybe unknowingly, but they've built a kind of toolbox, and they build a kind of tool that is actually perfectly tuned to helping to remedy the situation. Now, interestingly, if we look at this situation, even in Singapore, which is not, let's say, known for the radical actions of its citizens, only 20% of people have downloaded the app of the Singaporean framework, Singaporean government, only 20%. And the kind of uptake that we see with the other apps in places that, of course, voluntary and where there's no pressure, and where also seems to be not that much kind of peer pressure as in that system, the uptake is about 2, 3, 4, 5%, something like that, which is very strange. So this has to set one thinking. We have a pandemic. We have a tool that could actually help to alleviate this pandemic. We have people who are constantly walking with this thing in their hands, and they don't seem to trust it. So this is, to me, is really like this is like number one interesting situation. It must be extremely schizophrenia going on in the minds of all of us, of all these people, of us, of me, including me. That we have a tool. We're basically using it constantly. We're on it, kind of constantly. But we don't trust it. And we're not going to actually really trust it with our health at all, even in times of life and death situations. This to me is very strange, and I think this is the first thing we all have to address and have a debate on. And it seems that this is exactly what we've been lacking, and that's also what I've been calling for the past 10 years. When I set up the Internet of Things Council in 2009 and the IoT Day in 2010, especially the IoT Day, which has had about, I think, 500 self-organized events in 10 years, maybe even a little bit more, or in all over the world, was intended to set up a debate on this new paradigm that we've walked into, this new ontology, this new hybrid space. All our tools and all the policy tools, which we now also see, totally ineffective in this day and age. And as they are tuned to these analog drivers of what built the book and how they will build itself by this book paradigm. And they are not tuned to the virtual paradigm or the digital paradigm that up until the moment that it was seemingly still controllable because it was in particular devices, and the output of those devices just went into other devices, was simply seen as technology in factories, and engineers could sort of handle that. This changed around 2000 with the cloud. So all these things that we know, smart gadgets, smart whatever, was there in the mid-90s, but it was all demos because database storage was so expensive. I think in 1980, 1 gigabyte of storage was about $193,000 or something like that, which of course you can't really do tracking and tracing with these numbers. But around 2000, the cloud hit, and then we got this kind of mass capacity to sort of store and data. From that moment on, the world changed politically, economically, and psychologically drastically, but it wasn't really seen. It's quite logical, of course. It was seen by us. It was seen by people with a particular way of looking at the world, as it always is the case. And we tried to, as we always do, and we still try sometimes, to explain to people who make policy that their tools are now tuned to a reality that's gone, and that we can help them build better tools, but they still don't really believe us or believe that, which is okay because it's logical. It's a very logical situation. That's happened all over the time. It's something that has happened in all ages, and it will happen again. So it's not a big issue in itself. But the truth of the matter is that we're in a hybrid world, which means that the virtual world is no longer giving its output only in its virtual world, it's reacting back into the analog world. For example, this connected car, if you want an example, the connected car has so much input from what's happening in either its own computers or the cloud or the computers that are called the edge, which they store data more locally. But it will get so much input from the lantern poles, from the city furniture, from all of the things from other cars around it, and it will act before you can act. This is the whole notion of this kind of self-driving kind of car, which means that we've now come a little bit full circle, that data coming from our objects is going to some kind of a layer, and that layer is playing those objects back, which means that this is now our new reality. And then if you want to do some kind of policy on that, if you want to build this into kind of a society, then you have to build a toolbox in order to do that. So that's basically where we are now. And we thought that, we have such a tool, which is the smartphone. But now it's really interesting to see that because there was no debate at all on the phone, because there was no debate on what this phone was actually doing, and because there's been no debate on where the data of that phone is going, who or what is hosting it, sort of like in this whole situation. It seems to have inspired a huge amount of distrust instead of trust. And the strange, but it's also the elegance, I would say, the beauty of the situation is that everyone's using it constantly, all the time. So, I mean, Freud would have to say something about this, no doubt. So it means that basically in the heart of our dealing with basically ourselves, the heart of it, there's an enormous crack and rupture. There's got to be some tremendous unrest, because we've sort of managed to have a tool quite with us. We allow that tool to basically operate us, but we don't trust it. And to me, this really shows that if the level of distrust is at such an ontological level, because it speaks to the heart minds of basically of people. If the level of distrust is on such an ontological level, then you need to go to new tools and new carriers. Then, of course, there's basically two trajectories. There's a bigger one, in which we have to acknowledge that both of these models then are defunct. So there's no way for Facebook for the Facebooks and GAFA, for the American companies, to regain that trust. That's clear. If the level of distrust is so high, then there's no way for them with their mindset and with their brands to regain that trust. I mean, that's dead. And that effectively also means that their model of extracting, basically the advertising companies, that's basically it. Google's an advertising company, but let's say they do a little bit more, not much, but let's say a little bit more. Then if they do a little bit more, then even that can no longer be grasped under their heading. It's also shown with the fact that that Alphabet is not being able to build a city in Toronto. So all of these things are sort of happening. The level of distrust is so high, it's not working. But the other sort of, let's say, mental model of, let's say, the state is also run out of trust, which is also quite logical in a sense, because it no longer exists. So just if you have an example, let's say we take Holland as an example, everybody sort of pays taxes to particular things, which is good, and which you should do, which I think we still should do, we have to do, because we still have to have some kind of sense of community and the generic infrastructure. So yes, of course. But if you look at the situation now, you can basically see that, yeah, this kind of model has no more money because it's euros. It has no more law, 90% coming out of Brussels, has no more instruments, privatize everything. So basically the whole model only exists in the 8 o'clock news. Beyond it, it doesn't exist anymore. It's just a mental model in the 8 o'clock news and some people talking somewhere in a room in a city called Den Haag somewhere. But that's basically it. So this kind of model also doesn't have the data of its people, because they're in the hands of the others, of this commercial bubble that no one trusts anymore. And now they're also going to basically hand over or hand out identity, because this new legislation that says that digital identity management has to be also open to the market. So this is a very important moment in time where we need a strong public debate on this notion of identity and digital identity, because this digital identity is not just, as we've seen with the example of the connected car, it's not just, let's say, okay, I do a login and I log in something. No, this is going to be your life. And as we know already at this moment in time, that we're all paying different prices for different goods because our algorithms are sort of tuned to particular settings that no one knows how they are. There's also no democratic control over these things. But so Felix, when you buy something now and I buy something, we pay a different price. And then when you take a flight and I take a flight to the same location, we pay a different price. This dynamic pricing online is a bit hidden, but within a few years it will go offline and there'll be no more fixed prices in supermarkets. And you just put your phone to a good and you get your price. And then I don't think we should be really surprised when this happens within 3 to 5 years, because that's the logic of the whole situation of how things go, unless we reclaim and we retake digital identity management ourselves. And that's basically the new wave of movement that's happening, which is called self-sovereign identity, SSI. And that's something that I'm now looking into, that I'm sort of researching with people, that we are trying to understand, because we think that that's the new paradigm that we need. So as citizens, we see that we can no longer live in, let's say, this national state bubble. It's been a Westphalian model of 350 years. It's been quite nice in terms of doing good things. It's been quite horrible in doing bad things like starting wars and all of these things and creating this state apparatus, which was not really necessary, but sort of this is happening as itself. And as a kind of mental model, it's gone. It has to go, and it's going already. It's totally dead. It basically the only people who don't know it are the people who are still in it, but all the other people have left. When I was in Rome in 2012 in a meeting with police and intelligence and military people from on invitation by the CIA, by the public arm of the CIA, the GFF, in a military academy in Rome, talking about Internet of Things with Rick Hutley was also there, VP Cisco. The 150 military intelligence police professionals came back after certain kind of breakout groups into the main room, and they had 5 main worst case scenarios. Only one was military, and the other 2 was very interesting, I would think, at this moment, do-it-yourself biology. So out of the 5 major threat scenarios of 150 intelligence, police, military professionals, the 4 other main threat scenarios, 2 had to do with viruses. So 2 were do-it-yourself biology and the monitoring all do-it-yourself biology groups. And the other 2 was the total breakdown of society because of the inability of the state to deal with the digital. And of course, me and friends, we've been writing that from 2000. So I was very, very intrigued, but also a little bit upset to hear this analysis that I'd made myself 10 years before that, which of course they had also done. Because I thought, wow, I mean, I could think that. That's how my mind works. But if these professionals are thinking that, then it's really serious. Because if these professionals were able to voice this in 2012, of course, they'd already left themselves mentally this model in about 2000, which is exactly how the world is now sort of run, as it's not run. And all the trouble that we see in the intelligence services, in all the whole military sort of kind of thing, is because the people who understand or understood this ontological shift already left the institutional positions and the institutional positions around 2000, 2010, started up their own companies that we also basically now know what these companies basically are. So, so it's not as if this is some kind of a radical way of thinking. Something it's not at all. It's a quite logical assessment that's being made by the actors involved most themselves, which of course now is very worrying, because it shows that the only people left in these dying models, both commercially as well institutionally in terms of state actorship, are people who do not understand that there's an ontological shift and who will go down with the ship. And this is exactly what we now experience and see. So personally, and I also would advise this to anyone seeing this or watching this, is I would advise not to do anything for the next 5 years at least, and maybe the next 10 years. Of course, you have what you do, what I do, what other people do, small things. Try to make small, real building blocks. That's what I'm doing. That's what I think we all should be doing. But do not engage. Do not go to the street. Do not protest as in all of these kind of protesting kind of things that we see all around us now. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of space, and it's a waste of energy. This system is not changing. Will not change because of this. We can only build a new type of small honeypots for people to go to and leave this other model behind. But this model this dying model is actually now being propped up. It's being given energy. It's a vampire. So if you feed it with your protest, you're actually helping it to live a little bit longer, so to speak. So don't engage, leave it fully to wither away, as it will wither away, and don't feed it, because if you feed it, it's like a vampire. So concretely, what we're now looking into is that I'm also now part of this ETSI E4P group in Europe that's trying to look at all these contact kind of tracing apps, and it's clear that we see that we still have a lot of people working on particular models, and what I'm proposing, and with some other people in this more self-sovereign type of community, which of course is a new paradigm, which of course people cannot accept immediately, which will take time, which also has huge problems itself. So it's not a given as if it's like something that we can immediately switch to. We cannot. But what I would really like to happen is to have our best minds on that new paradigm, on that way of thinking. And the way we are thinking now is that we go to different carriers. So we go to wearables, maybe. So that we look at wearables. And although I'm not a 5G fan in the sense that we should all sort of really put 5G all over the planet. At the moment with Council, we're writing an article that if we want to go to smart cities, we should have zones of connectivity. So you should have a 5G zone where you can do your AR, VR connected car, your downloads 10,000 times faster. Pretty boring, but okay. If that's innovation, that's innovation to some people. But then they can have that in this zone. We should have zones of no connectivity, absolutely no connectivity. And there should be zones that are totally free of connectivity. There can be very, very low connectivity zones. And you can look at particular protocols. But in this kind of 5G connectivity zone, which will probably be places also where you have lots of events and lots of people will gather, that's where you can do some event management and crowd control with very, very dedicated carriers, and dedicated that you build yourself from the chip up, and dedicated connectivity, this dedicated sliced 5G connectivity. And then all of these carriers will have self-sovereign identity. Though none of these carriers will start identity with either a passport or a driver's license or a telephone number, because everything that starts now, if you allow the beginning of your communication architecture to start being verified and authenticated by either a telephone number, you're in a telco system, by either a passport, you'll be in this old passport in the state system. So we need a third way, and this third way, self-sovereign identity, is that I hold my own private keys, which of course is the main problem, because we're going to lose them. And if we lose them, you lose your life. So we need custodians. So we need technical backup and friends and family. But this is all things that we can work out. So that's the kind of the third way that's going to come, and that's the third way for the future. That means that people will own and start from their own identity. They will start issuing their own identity, and you will build this with what's called decentralized identifiers. You will build them with authenticated building blocks that do not refer to you, but that only refer to what you say and what you say that about you, and that claim can be verified, verifiable claims, or what someone else says about you is also sort of true in that kind of sort of constellation. So it's a very elegant kind of setup, and what we've been doing with a group that's called Disposable Community, and has different iterations. It's going to be one iteration with a foundation in Belgium called Twins, Chef from Bokijk and Mirko Ross as kind of main people who are leading that now. They have a Telegram, look it up, join it. And then there's lots of other disposable identities kind of flavors that's going to be out there. It's a very open concept. And this disposable identity then becomes this kind of throwaway identity. And this means that the new paradigm of living in this kind of total connectivity is that we want our win-win-win. So we want the connectivity, because if we don't have full resource management of things and goods, we're not going to be able to have at least a kind of chance with, against, and for climate change, sort of, if you want to say it like that. And so we need this connectivity. We're not against the connectivity. We want it. I wanted also to get good feedback on my health, my own resource management, in my own home, in the streets. It's a collaborative attitude. And in order to do that, we cannot go in there being constantly surveilled and traced and tracked. So we cannot go in there in either a state environment, and we cannot go in there with either a commercial environment, because both of them, however benevolent they are. So Vincerf is a great guy. He did fantastic things. I mean, there's no problem here at all with none of these things, none of these people. Most civil servants that I know are fantastic people. They really stand for collaborative way of working. They really stand for their community. It's fantastic. But all their efforts are in vain now. It's because the model itself is no longer tuned to reality. It has no more agency. So this is what I really feel very sometimes very upset about, that we have these such dumb policymakers and such enormously thick politicians that they do not understand that tools and agency needs to be tied to the new real technological situation, and that's of course pretty unfortunate. And I've given up totally on trying to make them understand, because if they don't understand now, they will never understand. Which is also the reason why I said and really urge you to stay quiet, to do your own thing, to move under the radar, to do little things, small things, set up your own things. Do not invest anymore in this model. The model is totally dead. Okay, the new model is self-sovereign identity, and from that self-sovereign identity, we can issue, or there's a model of having disposable identities, and that's very elegant. It means that for every purpose, for every scope, for every domain, limited in time, I can issue a type of identity. For example, I'm living in a house, I pay energy costs to an energy company. The energy company doesn't have to know that it's me at all. It just needs to know that I can pay. So if I could send this energy company some kind of token or credential or some kind of smart contract saying, person living in number 28 can pay, all they need to know is can pay 28. Because if I don't pay through the number 28, they can sort of come back and actually find me, which is quite logical because I have to pay. So if I don't pay, these things can be disclosed at some point. But if I do pay, I could live my whole life in a house paying money to the energy company that has no need to know who I am at all. They just need to have my money. So that's very simple. So this is the way that we're looking at things. We're going to build really end-to-end connections for every type of transaction that we do. Of course, these will be grouped sort of at some point, but if you want, you could build an identity, a disposable identity for every transaction, because that's the beauty of the situation, and it's cryptographically provable and proven. So it's underlined by Dynhawk's zenroom.org. And the beauty of that situation is that's cryptographic interoperability. The beauty of that situation is that basically what you do is if you send some kind of a data out, whatever it is, the requirements of handling that moment, that communication, that specific communication travels with it. And so this is how the start is of this kind of disposability of this identity, which is what we need. Because, and then I will close. The situation at the moment is a little bit like let's say, okay, we're in the kitchen, there's a chair, there's two tables. And GAFA is on one table, and the states are on the other table. And we citizens, we make up the majority of still people on this planet. We're not at the table. So we're either in a corner, sort of stand in the corner, like we used to do when we were in kindergarten. Like, you gotta go and stand in the corner, you were naughty. Or we're just crawling around on the floor. Or we're just trying to get up or whatever. Or we don't even know what we do, what we are, because we have no shape. And we're not together. So there's no, it's just we come together with crisis, but we don't come together in non-crisis. Sort of, this is very, very serious. So we need to build a chair. We need to build a chair to sit on that table. And SSI and disposable identities is the chair that gets us as individuals, as a group of individuals. So we're not talking about all this libertarian nonsense and all this American kind of transhumanist kind of just make money, whatever. We're not talking about that. Let's just do it here. No, we are talking about real community, building real face-to-face contacts and real good remote, a mix of remote and face-to-face and physical. So we have to build that chair. And that's what we're building. And there's just no way of stopping building that chair. And that image is even sort of assuming that these people will still be at the table. But what I'm actually thinking is that we're just building the chair in order to get seen by them. But basically, like I said, both of them are dying. Both models are dead. So I'm totally unworried about how this is going to evolve, because it's going to evolve like this. And I'm just happy to be part of this movement. It gives me great joy that we found a very, very good, productive, happy, positive way of which is a huge win-win, in which we can keep the connectivity. Because I've always thought that's how I built Council, and what all my writing was about: not smashing the cameras, or not smashing the sensors, but taking them over fully. So it's not about tracing or tracking itself. Is not a problem. It's just a problem that's just a few people watching, a few people having all this data and getting so proactively advanced. But what if we all have this capability? So of course we should leave all the cameras, just all the just leave everything on it. We should leave all the sensors, but we should open up all the data to everyone. And that's basically also something that's inevitably going to happen. Because like I said, the agency of both other actors are dramatically exposed in this COVID-19 situation, where they are offering a tool, and they're actually offering some kind of a remedy of a situation. And they're actually saying to people, look, we can help you. We can actually help you not get sick. And then still the uptake is about 3, 4, 5%. There's no trust whatsoever. That's gone. That's a dying model. Okay, no, that's it.